So what really happened to the Titan sub, and why is nobody talking about it? Before I even start, for entertainment purposes only, what I say on here may or may not be true. It's up to you to decide. So yesterday, after the Navy and the Coast Guard were able to salvage some of the wreckage from the Titan, this ship, the Horizon Arctic, brought the wreckage back to St. John's, Newfoundland. Down below, you can see where the Titanic wreckage roundabouts is, and there's St. John's, Newfoundland. So there's a lot of buzz on the internet talking about the items that they saw being lowered from the ship to the dock. Because I'm not going to lie, as I watched the footage, I thought the same thing. Supposedly, they weren't supposed to find anything. Then, if it imploded, wouldn't you think it would look like a crushed pop can or something along those lines? And what's more odd is a lot of the items they had covered, and not all the way, like halfway, just covering portions of them. And right now, a lot of the current talk is that there was bodies found on board, and that maybe there was actual remnants of like bodily fluid, like red fluid, all over the inside. If they found bodies, they would have kept them separately, and they probably wouldn't have lowered them to the deck for anybody to see. They would have kept them on the ship until later when there wasn't a bunch of cameras around. I'm honestly not sure where the reports that they found bodies are coming from. I don't know if people are just speculating because they covered portions of the sub, but to me that makes no sense. Obviously they wouldn't just leave the bodies on board and cover half of the salvage that they were on and just leave them on there. They would obviously put them in body bags and separate them from the wreckage. As far as I know, there haven't been any official reports of them finding bodies on board other than from news stations, and we know how accurate they can be. I haven't heard anything from the Navy or the Coast Guard. So the assumption that they're there simply because they're covering the wreckage really doesn't make any sense. And then as far as finding any red fluid from the bodies on these salvaged items is not going to happen because they were underwater, saltwater for that matter. Officially, I don't think any bodily fluid would actually stick to the wreckage or actually stain it. It doesn't make any sense. I don't know where people are getting that from, but it just doesn't add up. Clearly, you can see that is a fully intact hull. Now, if it imploded, wouldn't that have at least crunched in some sort of way? That thing is perfectly intact. So before I continue, I just want to say I'm not trying to spread misinformation. I'm not trying to sway anybody any way at all. It's just a theory of mine. To me, this piece is the most telling, and I believe it's the actual tail end of the sub. You can see how it comes to a point, it's rounded, and it would have hooked up to the back phalange and then came up to the tail. So as you can see, I believe that this is a part of the tail end of the sub. And you can see here, this indent from something. That mark really kind of caught my attention. So I watched very closely as it spun around. And sure enough, as it did spin around, they had it covered and taped up. Very peculiar. And if you look closely at this portion, you can see there's a little chunk taken out here, and there's a little chunk taken out here. Which, if you'll notice in this picture, there's your chunk. So, I am right. I believe that portion is from the back of the sub. So looking back at more pictures of the salvage, you can see that it's in complete disarray. It looks like a total wreck. I'd say, if anything, it looked like the thing exploded from the inside rather than imploded. Another image shows more disarray. This looks like the midsection of it, but the panels seemingly have been ripped off. So again, I'll ask, what was the point in covering up just portions, not all, but just portions of the wreckage? What could have possibly happened to those portions of the sub that they don't want the public to see? And again, coming back to this mark and why they covered it up. Like I said, to me, this is the most telling. They didn't want us to see that this was attacked. And why is everybody forgetting about the knocking sound they picked up on the hydrophones that are underwater? Take a listen. So they have that knocking sound, but yet we haven't heard any sound of it imploding. That strikes me as odd. Why aren't they releasing the sound of the sub imploding? Well, that's because it didn't implode. The knocking sound was a quick distress call from the men inside when they saw what was coming. Either that, or they were praying to God that them doing that would actually scare it away. Why do you think that even though the Coast Guard was ready to do what they could to get to that sub, but the government wouldn't let them? They wouldn't let them go near dropping anything in that water. It's because they knew. I'd argue that they had a good idea that something else was down there based off the sounds, and they didn't want anybody else to end up like these guys. Just like the Indonesian sub, whatever did it with intent. And they tore that sub open almost as if they knew what was inside. Now, what was it? Your guess is as good as mine. Could it have been a giant squid? Possibly a megalodon? It could have been either. But if you want my honest opinion, I think it's something more intelligent. I think it's a creature that knows that these items are of human make, and it knows that humans are on board them. Something similar to organism 46B from Lake Vostok. Something highly evolved and highly intelligent. Something that's been here for thousands of years, if not tens of thousands. And it's letting us know that it still owns the ocean. Again, this is just a theory of mine. I'm not saying it's absolute fact. I'm just saying, based on what it looks like, there's more to this story. And I believe this is it. Just as I said in my previous post about it, the Navy knew on day one what happened to that sub. If I'm wrong, only time will tell. But if they don't release anything, like the sound of it imploding, you can bet. If you haven't noticed, all the hype has kind of died down. They're hoping it'll just skate under the radar. People won't ask questions. But you heard it here. This is what I believe took place. Stay in love, stay in light, be kind to others. Let me know what y'all think in the comments. I'm curious as your opinions. And keep watching. I am out.